Hi, this is Kenji from Chicago RC Racing. Got my buddy Kevin Kane here with a Schumacher MI 3.5 chassis.
Yes.
And Kevin is going to explain to us today how to take a chassis from the Asphalt, which we've been racing here in Chicago, to carpet season. It's September, and come October, most of us are heading in for carpet season. So Kevin, here's a fresh chassis. This was set up for Asphalt.
Yes.
And what are the things that I should look for, or what should I do point by point to take my chassis from a whole summer of asphalt racing to carpet? What do you do?
Okay. First thing I would do is I would probably take the car apart and just clean everything, because when you're racing outside, you do get a lot of grime in the bearings and everything else. You know, you're probably gonna want to rebuild your shocks because they're probably gonna be dirty oil. So you probably want to put some fresh oil in there. And if you were running outside, you know, everybody usually runs really light oil. For inside, you probably want to go up 10 weight all around. So if you were running 30 and 20 for outside, you probably want to go 40 in the front and 30 in the back, or sometimes you can go 50-40 depending on your car.
Okay.
One of the other things that we probably want to do for going inside too is you probably want to go up in your caster, because asphalt you usually run 0 or 2 degrees caster, sometimes 4. On carpet it's usually 4 or 6. That's usually the normal for running on carpet.
Now a caster change on most chassis, that means changing
Your C-hub.
the C-hub. So literally purchasing or having a different C-hub,
Right, exactly.
and installing one, and that would be front and rear?
No, it'd only be in the front.
Okay.
You know, then in the back, a lot of times outside, you'll run, you might run, I would say probably 3 or 4 degrees of rear toe-in.
Okay.
Just to get the car a little bit more stable depending on the tracks. And when you go inside, on carpet, you're going to have a lot more traction, so you're not going to need all that toe-in. So you can usually go down to about 2 degrees toe-in in the back.
Okay.
And make the car a little bit faster, and you won't really have to worry about it spinning out or anything like that.
Now this would be for Super Stock, which is a 19-turn
Exactly.
RCGT.
RCGT.
Many of the Trans Am guys already have their toe-in taken out, right?
Exactly.
So you don't worry about the back
Yeah, you
end.
don't
So
worry
we go
about the
back
back
to
end
the
too
front
much.
end.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's caster. What's the next step?
And the other thing too, I would probably look at your shock angles.
Okay.
A lot of times, because a lot of times on asphalt, people tend to run their shocks, laid in a lot, so they can get a lot of weight transfer front and back.
Okay.
And when you come on carpet, usually what you do is you stand your shocks up, and the more you stand your shocks up on carpet, usually the faster the car is going to corner. So
Okay.
the more upright you stand up your shocks, the better it's going to be.
So this right now is set up more for an asphalt,
Exactly.
which is to the inside.
To the inside.
So we'll come out. Will you come out 1, 2, or what?
I would probably come out 2 holes from where I'm at now.
Okay.
But that kind of depends on your car and depends on the way that your car is set up for outside.
Okay.
And the other thing too is a lot of people run a spool on the asphalt. And it's kind of a misconception. People think that you can't run a spool on carpet, but me personally, I always run a spool. Now some people go to a one-way. The problem being with a one-way is you can, I always feel you can maybe run one faster lap with a one-way, but you can't run it more consistently.
Okay.
Whereas when you use a spool, I think you can do more faster laps consistently.
Okay.
So that's kind of a personal preference too.
So personal preference for you is spool.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. The other thing I would look at is, sometimes outside, you might run, your roll centers really low to the ground, and on this car here, this is your roll center block.
Okay.
And then you just put different blocks on, and that would raise or lower your hinge pins. Now, for carpet, usually you run your roll centers a little bit higher because you don't want the car to roll as much.
Okay.
And that's really what you're changing there. And then the other thing would be camber. On carpet, the more camber you have, the more traction your car is going to have in the corner. So you usually outside you're not really running that much camber because you're going to deal a lot more with your tire wear outside than you are inside.
Okay.
So that's another adjustment that you'd make there.
So camber for carpet, you might go to
you might
how
go
many
to
degrees?
2 degrees.
Okay.
2.5 degrees. Outside you might be running 1.5. Depending on your tire wear. So other than that, your ride height, inside you can run it a little bit lower. You would probably want to run it 5 millimeters. That's pretty much the normal standard for your minimum height.
Yeah, I think it's strictly most people are between 5 and 6.
Right. And then
outdoors,
outside, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes outside people run their ride height a little bit higher just because if there's bumps in the car, or
Right.
bumps on the track or something like that, you're gonna you're going to want to run a little bit higher.
Now, ride height on this car is adjusted by
your preload on your shock valve.
preload, which is this threaded
Right.
area. Some people, like TC3s and others, would have inserts that
They would put inside the shock.
And
right.
and as far as ride height is concerned, you take the ride height even across front to back would be the same for carpet.
Usually on carpet, I usually run the front a little bit higher than the back.
Okay.
And that's usually because like you want your car to have a little bit more weight transfer to the front, and it's kind of like your droop, and that's another change that you could do as well.
Okay.
Because outside you generally run more droop outside to get the car to roll more and build more traction, whereas like when you go on a carpet, you don't want to really run that much droop because then your car might traction roll. So that's where you would adjust your droop screws on
Droop screws
on
are
your suspension arm right here,
okay.
and you would take the wrench and you would turn the screw in to decrease your droop, and you would unscrew that to increase your droop.
Now, do you personally have a droop gauge, or do you use?
I use a ride height gauge.
Okay.
Where I have my car all ready to run, where it's got a motor and a battery and everything in it and the wheels on it, and then I set my car at ride height. So if my car's set at 5 millimeters, I would take and lift up on the car, and I'd slide the ride height gauge underneath here, and then if the ride height gauge went to 7 before the wheels came off, then I know I'm 2 millimeters above ride height, and that's generally where you want to be. Sometimes less than that, but that's the easiest way that I can check.
And that would be the same for front and rear.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like sometimes if you run a little bit more droop in the front, you're going to have more steering. If you're going to run a little bit more droop in the back, you're going to have more rear traction.
Okay.
And that's kind of the easiest way to look at it.
Okay. Now, tires, if you're a stock rubber guy, and you are running slicks, obviously, here in Chicago we're running RCGT, TA, super stock. But tires, is it a huge difference if you're running super stock? Are you changing up manufacturer of tire?
I wouldn't necessarily say manufacturer, but outside you're probably going to run a lot harder compound because of the heat.
Okay.
So you might be running like a 36 or 32.
Okay.
Or sometimes even a 40, depending on the maker of the tire. Inside, everybody pretty much runs like a 27 to like a 30 range.
Okay.
So you're going to go a little bit softer on the tire.
Okay, great.
If you're running Jayco tires, you're going to run Jayco blues or greens. If you run RP tires, it'll be RP 30s. If you run CS tires, it'll be CS 27s. Sorexes are 28s.
Okay.
And the Xenon tires are also 28s. Those are pretty much your standard carpet tires.
And obviously RCGT, we're all running those X pattern tires, right?
Right, exactly.
Which hopefully we'll see a lot of those guys at Underground this year, Elk Grove and up at Winthrop Harbor. So where are we going to see you this winter, Kevin?
This winter you'll probably see me. I'd like to make it out to Underground a few times.
Okay.
But more than likely you'll probably see me up at the track.
Okay.
In the harbor, and then if you're going to make it out to any of the Hurricane All-Star races.
Right. First race is October 3rd,
October
correct?
3rd up at the track in Winthrop Harbor. That's a Saturday.
We'll be there.
Yeah. Last year I think we averaged 86 guys per race.
Wow.
So, it's a real good time.
October 3rd.
October 3rd.
We'll be there. All right, Kevin, thanks for your time. I appreciate you coming out.
All right, thanks.
See ya.